It wasn't the sound of a notification or the flashing numbers on my screen that shook me to my core. It was the realization that, for years, I had unknowingly carried the keys to a fortune, one that could alter the trajectory of my entire life. Sitting there, bathed in the glow of my computer monitor, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. 850 Bitcoin. That's what my old, forgotten wallet contained. Worth millions now, but back then? It was just fun money, a digital gimmick from an internship that had barely paid enough to buy lunch. But this was no gimmick anymore. This was real. My pulse quickened as I stared at the balance. My hands hovered over the keyboard, desperate to withdraw it all, yet frozen by fear. A single thought consumed me: what if I lost it all in one reckless move? What if this chance, this incredible, life-changing chance, slipped through my fingers like sand? When I look back, I sometimes wonder if it was fate or sheer randomness that set me on this path. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in computer engineering, and like many of my peers, I was full of optimism but short on opportunities. My goal was straightforward: to find a job, any job, in a field that would let me grow. The first opportunity that came my way wasn't glamorous. A local tech company, known more for its stability than innovation, offered me an internship. The pay was laughable, a symbolic stipend that didn't even cover my monthly rent. But I took it. Not because of the money, but because I believed that the experience would be priceless. I spent my days debugging legacy code, tinkering with servers, and running scripts for the company's small yet committed IT team. It wasn't flashy work, but I loved every second of it. I wanted to prove myself, to learn everything I could about the systems and processes that kept the modern world running. I stayed late most evenings, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. One day, during a particularly uneventful week, my supervisor handed me a slip of paper with a QR code. "Here," he said casually, "your stipend for today." Curious, I scanned the code on my phone, which I had recently set up with a digital wallet for a side project. 5 Bitcoin, that was the stipend. At the time, Bitcoin was little more than a novelty in the tech community, an experiment with no serious value attached to it. 1 Bitcoin was worth maybe $10, fluctuating wildly. I remember chuckling as I watched the transaction confirm on my phone. It felt like a video game, a digital reward for completing a level. Except this wasn't a game. This was real life, and those 5 coins, I'd soon realize, were more than just a token gesture. Bitcoin in 2011 wasn't what it is today. It was an idea, an experiment, a curious digital anomaly only a handful of tech enthusiasts cared about. For most people, it didn't make sense. Why would anyone trade real money for a digital coin that wasn't backed by a government or a central bank? But for a small community of believers, Bitcoin was the future, a currency free from borders, politics, and control. Back then, I didn't see it as a revolution. For me, Bitcoin was just a novelty. A quirky tech token I'd earned from an internship that paid in digital magic internet money. Those first 5 BTC I received felt more like a badge of participation than actual compensation. My supervisor had laughed, calling it a symbolic gesture, a playful way to expose interns to cutting-edge concepts. "Someday, this might be worth something," he'd said, a half smile on his face. I remember transferring the coins to a wallet app I'd downloaded on my phone, more out of curiosity than expectation. The process felt odd, like collecting points in a video game. Once the transaction confirmed, the balance popped up on the screen, 5 BTC. Cool, I thought, and then promptly forgot about it. Over the next few months, I earned a total of 100 BTC from the internship. The company wasn't generous with cash, but they were liberal with Bitcoin payouts, likely because the coins were cheap and experimental. At the time, 1 BTC was worth less than a decent sandwich. I kept all of it in the same wallet, which was nothing more than an app protected by a simple password. I didn't think much of security. Who would? It wasn't like anyone was trying to steal Bitcoin back then. Occasionally, I'd check the wallet, watching the value bounce between $7 and $15 per coin. The wild fluctuations made Bitcoin seem more like a joke than a serious asset. I joked with friends about using it to buy a pizza, referencing the infamous story of someone actually spending 10,000 BTC on 2 pizzas. At least I'm not that guy, I'd laugh. But Bitcoin wasn't just a laughing matter for everyone. A niche group of enthusiasts began to build the infrastructure around it. Forums buzzed with activity, developers worked on improving the blockchain, and even a handful of merchants started accepting it as payment. I remember hearing about a cafe in Berlin that would let you pay for coffee with Bitcoin. It sounded ridiculous to me, like trading pebbles for a cup of tea. The idea that this digital token might have real-world value felt too far-fetched. Still, there were moments of curiosity. On slow days, I'd browse forums like Bitcoin Talk, reading heated debates about the technology's potential. Some users passionately argued that Bitcoin would revolutionize the global economy, breaking free from the grip of banks and governments. Others dismissed it as a Ponzi scheme destined to collapse. I found the discussions entertaining but ultimately irrelevant to my life. My wallet remained untouched. In retrospect, I realize how naive I was. Every headline about Bitcoin's slow rise should have been a wake-up call. Bitcoin hits $100, one article announced, sparking online celebrations and debates. I remember rolling my eyes, thinking, good for them, before moving on to whatever problem I was debugging at work. At the time, I was more concerned with learning new coding languages and making my mark as a junior engineer than worrying about some obscure cryptocurrency. Little did I know, the world of Bitcoin was beginning to change. Slowly but surely, it was creeping into tech headlines. A growing number of developers and investors were starting to take it seriously, treating it as more than a nerdy experiment. Some even called it digital gold. I'd glance at these articles with mild interest, but I never connected the dots to my own tiny stash. To me, Bitcoin was still just a fun artifact from my intern days, something to laugh about over drinks with friends. It wasn't until much later that I realized how wrong I was. That quiet revolution, the one I had watched unfold from the sidelines, was already rewriting the rules of finance. And all the while, I was sitting on a digital treasure chest, completely oblivious to its value. Life has a way of pulling you in different directions, and Bitcoin, for all its quirky novelty, became an afterthought. After the internship ended, I landed a full-time job at a mid-sized tech firm. The pay wasn't extraordinary, but it was steady, and I felt a sense of relief knowing I could finally afford my rent without scrambling. My focus shifted entirely to building my career, and my digital wallet, containing what I now know were 100 BTC, slipped further and further from my mind. Those early years were consumed by the hustle of postgraduate life. Long hours debugging systems, learning new programming languages, and navigating office politics left little room for idle curiosities. The world of Bitcoin felt light years away from my daily grind of deadlines and deliverables. Occasionally, I'd hear a mention of it in passing, a news headline or a watercooler conversation, but it never piqued my interest enough to revisit that old wallet app. Bitcoin wasn't just on the back burner, it was off the stove entirely. I think the first time I truly felt a pang of regret was in late 2013, during the infamous Bitcoin rally. It had breached $1,000 for the first time, and suddenly everyone was talking about it. "Have you seen this Bitcoin thing?" co-workers asked. "It's insane. Some guy in England just bought a Tesla with it." At first, I shrugged it off. But that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I opened my laptop and searched for Bitcoin's price history. The graph was staggering, an upward climb that defied logic. It stirred something in me, a distant memory of those digital coins I'd earned years ago. My heart raced as I reached for my phone to check the wallet app. It was gone. The app, I discovered, had been discontinued. The company behind it had folded sometime in 2012, leaving users scrambling to migrate their funds. Panic set in as I realized I had no idea where my private keys were. Back in my internship days, I hadn't thought twice about securing those keys. They were probably scribbled on a sticky note somewhere or buried in an old folder on my ancient laptop. A sickening dread washed over me. Had I really lost what might now be worth a small fortune? For weeks, I tore through every piece of old tech I owned. Hard drives, USB sticks, even long-forgotten cloud accounts, nothing was spared my frantic search. Each dead end only heightened my anxiety. I told no one about it, partly out of embarrassment and partly because I couldn't bear to hear the inevitable chorus of "I told you so." Life went on, but the search for those keys lingered in the back of my mind like a nagging itch. Bitcoin's value continued to rise, and with every milestone it hit, $5,000, $10,000, the stakes felt higher. I couldn't shake the thought, somewhere, locked away, were coins that could change my life. If only I could find them. Bitcoin's rise wasn't just a financial story, it became a cultural phenomenon. By 2015, mainstream media couldn't ignore it anymore. Documentaries and articles chronicled the stories of early adopters turned millionaires, fueling envy and disbelief in equal measure. I couldn't help but imagine myself among them. Those headlines felt like cruel reminders of my lost opportunity. Then, in early 2017, something miraculous happened. While cleaning out an old drawer, I stumbled across a weathered notebook. Inside, among doodles and half-finished code snippets, was a sequence of random words. My breath caught as I realized what I was looking at, the recovery phrase for my wallet. My hands trembled as I typed it into a new app. There it was, 850 BTC. The balance stared back at me, as surreal as finding a winning lottery ticket crumpled in your pocket. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Years of frustration, regret, and hopeless searching evaporated in an instant. I had found it, my forgotten treasure. But with that discovery came a new set of problems. What now? Should I sell it all? Hold on to it? The sheer magnitude of what I'd uncovered was paralyzing. Each decision felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. Little did I know, the hardest part of this journey was just beginning. The rediscovery of my wallet catapulted me into an entirely new world. Friends and family, who'd only ever seen me as a struggling tech guy, suddenly looked at me differently. Word spread quickly, too quickly. People began asking questions, offering advice, and even making not-so-subtle hints about borrowing the money. It was overwhelming. For the first time in my life, I understood the weight of wealth. One of the first decisions I faced was whether to liquidate a portion of the Bitcoin. By now, the price had surged past $15,000 per coin. Selling just a fraction could pay off my student loans, buy a house, and give me financial security I'd never dreamed of. But the thought of letting go was terrifying. What if the price kept climbing? What if I sold too soon and lived to regret it? Everywhere I turned, people had an opinion. Co-workers who barely understood cryptocurrency suddenly became financial experts. Sell it all, one said. It's a bubble and it's going to burst. Others urged me to hold on. This is just the beginning, they insisted. Bitcoin's going to $100,000. The noise was deafening, and I didn't know who to trust. In the end, I decided to cash out a small portion, just enough to cover some immediate needs. I sold 100 BTC, netting over $1.5 million after taxes. The feeling was surreal. Overnight, I'd gone from paycheck to having a seven-figure bank balance. Yet, as exhilarating as it was, it also felt strangely empty. The remaining 750 BTC loomed large in my mind, a mix of potential and uncertainty that would define the next chapter of my life. The adrenaline of rediscovering my Bitcoin wallet slowly gave way to a gnawing sense of unease. The 100 BTC I had cashed out brought financial freedom I'd never imagined, yet I couldn't stop obsessing over the remaining 750 BTC. Each day felt like a balancing act between hope and fear. I was haunted by two questions: should I sell? Or should I hold? At first, I avoided thinking about it altogether. The windfall from my initial sale had allowed me to pay off my student loans, upgrade my old car, and finally put a down payment on a modest house. Life had become infinitely easier, but the knowledge of what remained in my wallet was like an ever-present weight on my shoulders. Bitcoin's price movements didn't help. Every spike sent my heart racing, while every dip filled me with dread. It wasn't just the value of my holdings that fluctuated, it was my peace of mind. By late 2017, Bitcoin had broken through the $20,000 mark, and the frenzy around it reached fever pitch. The media breathlessly reported on its meteoric rise, fueling both excitement and skepticism. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them found their way to me. "You're crazy if you don't sell now," one friend warned me during a holiday party. "It's never going to hit these levels again." Another coworker, a self-proclaimed crypto expert, insisted the opposite. "You've got to hodl, man," he said, using the now famous crypto slang for holding onto Bitcoin no matter what. "This is just the beginning. We're heading to $100,000, maybe more." The conflicting advice only added to my confusion. Deep down, I knew no one could predict the future of Bitcoin, but their voices became a constant hum in my mind. I started spending hours each night reading articles, watching videos, and combing through Reddit forums. Everyone seemed either euphorically optimistic or apocalyptically pessimistic. The lack of clarity was maddening. My family's reactions weren't much better. When they learned about my Bitcoin holdings, the conversation shifted. Some were subtle, asking questions about what I planned to do with the money. Others were blunt. "Why don't you sell it and retire?" one cousin asked during Thanksgiving dinner. "You're just being greedy." It was hard to explain that it wasn't greed keeping me from selling. It was fear of making the wrong decision, fear of watching Bitcoin's value skyrocket after I sold, and fear of losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'd read too many stories of people who sold too soon and lived to regret it, forever haunted by the what-if. But there was another fear lurking beneath the surface, one I hadn't yet admitted to myself, the fear of what wealth might do to me. Even the small fortune I'd cashed out had changed how people treated me. Friends who'd once laughed at my frugal lifestyle now asked for investment tips. Family members hinted at financial problems, hoping I'd offer to help. The sudden shift in dynamics was disorienting, and I worried that selling more Bitcoin would only magnify it. By early 2018, the decision became even harder. Bitcoin's price had started to tumble, and the media was filled with stories of a bursting bubble. Headlines warned of impending crashes and financial ruin for latecomers who had bought at the peak. I watched in agony as the value of my holdings dropped by thousands of dollars each day. The temptation to sell grew stronger. One sleepless night, I sat at my computer, staring at my wallet balance. The price of Bitcoin had dipped below $10,000, and I felt a surge of panic. What if it kept falling? What if the skeptics were right and Bitcoin was destined to crash to zero? My hand hovered over the mouse, ready to initiate a sale. But then, I stopped. A memory from my internship surfaced, my supervisor's half-smile as he handed me that first 5 BTC, saying, "Someday, this might be worth something." Back then, I hadn't believed him, but he had been right. Bitcoin's journey had been anything but smooth, but it had proven its resilience time and time again. Selling now felt like betraying the very belief that had brought me here. I closed the browser and walked away from the computer. I couldn't make a decision that night. Instead, I resolved to take a step back and clear my mind. I took a weekend trip to the mountains, leaving my phone and laptop behind. The time away helped me gain perspective. I realized that my obsession with Bitcoin's price was consuming me, turning what should have been a blessing into a burden. When I returned, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell, not yet. I set a new goal: hold on to my remaining Bitcoin for at least 5 years, no matter what. It wasn't an easy choice, but it felt like the right one. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The journey was far from over, but I had taken a step toward reclaiming control. Little did I know, the challenges ahead would test my resolve in ways I could never have imagined. In the years that followed my decision to hold onto my Bitcoin, life settled into a peculiar rhythm. My initial 100 BTC sale had provided me with financial stability, and I leaned into the freedom it afforded. Yet, the remaining 750 BTC stayed locked away in my wallet, a sleeping giant whose value ebbed and flowed unpredictably. It was a strange dichotomy, living modestly while holding a fortune most could only dream of. During this time, I began to reflect on the opportunities this newfound wealth could provide. For years, I had carried a childhood dream close to my heart, building a state-of-the-art tech lab where curious minds could tinker, innovate, and create. As a boy, I'd spent countless hours dismantling old electronics, fascinated by the mechanics of how things worked. That curiosity had driven me to pursue a career in computer engineering, but I'd never imagined I might one day have the resources to make such a dream a reality. By mid-2019, Bitcoin was climbing again, reaching new heights. The steady rise renewed the chorus of opinions around me. Friends and family urged me to cash out while I still could, warning me not to get greedy. But this time, their voices didn't carry the same weight. I had grown more confident in my decision to hold, and I began to think seriously about using a small portion of my holdings to finally bring my dream to life. The idea of selling even a fraction of my Bitcoin was daunting. I'd seen firsthand how volatile the market could be, and the fear of missing out on future gains still lingered. But the dream was too important to ignore. I knew that waiting for the perfect moment to sell was a fool's errand. After weeks of deliberation, I decided to withdraw another 100 BTC. The sale netted me over $3 million, even after taxes and fees. Holding the wire transfer confirmation in my hands felt surreal. This wasn't just a number on a screen anymore, it was tangible, actionable wealth. I wasted no time putting it to use. I scouted locations, met with architects, and began assembling a team of engineers and makers who shared my vision. Within a year, the lab was more than just an idea, it was a thriving hub of innovation. Walking through its doors for the first time was one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. The space was everything I'd imagined: sleek workstations, cutting-edge tools, and walls lined with shelves of components waiting to be transformed. The lab quickly became a magnet for talent, drawing in hobbyists, students, and professionals eager to collaborate on projects ranging from robotics to renewable energy solutions. The lab didn't just fulfill my childhood dream, it gave me a sense of purpose. For the first time since discovering my Bitcoin fortune, I felt like I was using it to create something meaningful. Watching a young student's eyes light up as they completed their first circuit or seeing a team successfully prototype a new device reminded me why I had pursued this path in the first place. It wasn't about the money, it was about possibility. Of course, not everyone understood my decision. "You're throwing away millions," one acquaintance scoffed when I told them about the lab. "Why not just retire and enjoy life?" But to me, this was enjoying life. The lab wasn't just a personal project, it was a legacy. It was proof that wealth, when used thoughtfully, could be a force for good. Yet, even as the lab flourished, the rest of my Bitcoin holdings remained a point of contention. By late 2020, Bitcoin's value had skyrocketed again, reaching $30,000 per coin. The calls to sell grew louder, and my resolve was tested daily. I'd learned to tune out most of the noise, but the internal struggle never fully went away. Each spike in value brought a fresh wave of temptation. I reminded myself of the commitment I'd made: 5 years. No selling, no panic-driven decisions, just patience. It wasn't always easy. The market's highs and lows played on my emotions like a symphony of chaos. But the lab grounded me. Whenever I felt the pull to cash out, I'd walk through its doors and watch the magic of creation unfold. It was a reminder of what truly mattered. In the end, the decision to withdraw that second batch of Bitcoin wasn't about fear or greed, it was about fulfilling a promise to myself. I had taken a piece of my fortune and turned it into something real, something that could outlast the volatility of any market. The lab became a symbol of what I wanted my life to stand for: curiosity, innovation, and the courage to dream big. As for the remaining 650 BTC, they stayed right where they were, untouched and waiting. Their story was far from over, and so was mine. The world didn't slow down after I built the lab, in fact, it sped up. The attention it garnered brought new opportunities, but also challenges I hadn't anticipated. As the value of Bitcoin continued to climb, so did the expectations placed upon me by those around me. Success, I learned, came with its own peculiar set of pressures. By 2021, Bitcoin had crossed $50,000 per coin, and my remaining 650 BTC represented an almost incomprehensible fortune. Friends, family, and even acquaintances from years ago began reaching out. Some congratulated me on my success, but many sought favors, loans to pay off debt, investments in their startups, or donations to causes they deemed worthy. While I wanted to help where I could, the sheer volume of requests was overwhelming. I found myself becoming wary, questioning people's motives in a way I never had before. The media didn't help. News of the lab and my Bitcoin holdings leaked, turning me into a local celebrity of sorts. Journalists reached out for interviews, while social media buzzed with speculation about my wealth and what I should do with it. Bitcoin millionaire builds tech lab, one headline read. Another less flattering article suggested I was hoarding wealth instead of using it for public good. The scrutiny was exhausting. Through it all, the lab remained my sanctuary. Watching teams collaborate and seeing projects come to life reminded me why I had started this journey. But even there, the pressure seeped in. People wanted to know why I wasn't expanding faster or taking on more ambitious initiatives. Investors approached me, offering to buy stakes in the lab or partner on large-scale ventures. Some of their proposals were tempting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that involving outside money would compromise the lab's ethos. By mid-2021, the noise became deafening. Bitcoin had surged past $60,000, and the value of my holdings exceeded $39 million. The temptation to sell grew stronger, fueled by stories of people losing their fortunes in sudden market crashes. I'd seen Bitcoin's volatility firsthand and knew how quickly it could plummet. Every headline predicting an impending crash felt like a warning bell. One particularly sleepless night, I found myself staring at my wallet again, much as I had years before. The balance was astronomical, but it wasn't just numbers on a screen anymore. It represented opportunities, security, and a level of freedom most people could only dream of. Yet, it also carried the weight of expectation and responsibility. I felt paralyzed by the decision before me. I turned to the one thing that had always helped me find clarity, the lab. The next morning, I arrived early and walked the halls, taking in the hum of activity. Teams were working on everything from AI-driven medical devices to sustainable energy solutions. The sheer scope of their creativity and dedication was humbling. It reminded me that this wasn't just about me or my wealth, it was about the impact I could make. Inspired, I decided to use a portion of my Bitcoin holdings to expand the lab. I sold another 50 BTC, generating over $3 million. This time, the funds were used to launch scholarships for young innovators and create outreach programs to bring technology education to underserved communities. The decision felt right. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of purpose rather than pressure. But the expansion didn't silence the critics. Why not sell it all? They asked. Why not fund global initiatives or start a foundation? The question stung, not because I didn't care, but because I felt the weight of their implications. No matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. The more Bitcoin's value grew, the more people expected me to solve problems far beyond my reach. By late 2021, Bitcoin began to dip, losing nearly 40% of its value in a matter of weeks. The crash reignited fears I thought I had overcome. For days, I avoided looking at my wallet, terrified of what I might see. When I finally checked, the numbers were sobering. My holdings had lost tens of millions in value. But instead of panic, I felt an odd sense of relief. The drop reminded me of a lesson I had learned early on: wealth, no matter how vast, is fleeting. What truly mattered were the choices I made and the legacy I left behind. The lab continued to thrive, and so did I. The pressure, while still present, no longer dictated my actions. I had found a balance between holding onto my Bitcoin and using it to create tangible, lasting impact. As the year came to a close, I made peace with the idea that not every decision would be perfect, but each one could be meaningful. The story of my Bitcoin holdings was far from over, but for the first time in years, it no longer felt like the story of my life. Instead, it was a tool, a powerful one, that I could wield to build the future I had always dreamed of. The start of 2022 was a sobering reminder of just how volatile Bitcoin could be. After reaching its all-time high of nearly $69,000 in late 2021, the market began to unravel. By mid-year, Bitcoin's value had plummeted to under $20,000. It felt like déjà vu, a painful echo of past crashes that had tested my resolve. At first, I tried to stay detached. I'd learned by now that panicking during a crash was the quickest way to make a bad situation worse. But it wasn't easy. Each drop in value gnawed at me, bringing back the old fears. What if this was the end of Bitcoin? What if I'd missed my chance to secure my future by holding on too long? The media didn't make it any easier. Headlines declared the death of Bitcoin with gleeful certainty. Pundits who had once hailed it as a revolutionary asset now called it a failed experiment. Even some of the crypto community seemed shaken, with forums full of users lamenting their losses and questioning their faith in the technology. Despite the noise, I held firm. My earlier decision to keep my holdings untouched for 5 years became my anchor. It wasn't just a strategy, it was a promise to myself. I reminded myself of Bitcoin's history, how it had bounced back from every crash, each time climbing to new heights. I had to trust that this time would be no different. While the market floundered, the lab continued to thrive. The scholarships and outreach programs we'd launched the previous year were making a tangible impact. One of our scholarship recipients, a young engineer named Carla, developed an affordable solar-powered water filtration system that gained international recognition. Seeing her success reminded me why I had chosen this path. The value of my Bitcoin holdings might rise and fall, but the lab's impact was real and enduring. Still, the crash forced me to make some tough decisions. The lab's expansion plans were put on hold, and I had to get creative with budgeting to keep our existing programs running. It was a humbling experience, a stark contrast to the heady days of rapid growth. Yet, it also strengthened my resolve. If I could weather this storm, both personally and professionally, I knew I'd come out stronger on the other side. By late 2022, signs of recovery began to emerge. Bitcoin stabilized around $30,000, and the broader crypto market showed renewed signs of life. While it was far from the dizzying highs of the previous year, the rebound brought a sense of hope. The crash had tested me in ways I hadn't anticipated, but it also reaffirmed my belief in the long-term potential of Bitcoin. As the market recovered, so did my confidence. I revisited the lab's postponed projects, carefully evaluating which ones could be revived without overextending our resources. One initiative I prioritized was a partnership with local schools to introduce technology workshops for underserved youth. The idea was simple: to inspire the next generation of innovators by giving them hands-on experience with cutting-edge tools and techniques. The workshops were a resounding success. Watching students light up as they coded their first programs or assembled their first robots filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. It was a reminder that wealth, for all its complexities, was ultimately a means to an end. The true measure of success wasn't the size of my Bitcoin wallet, it was the impact I could make with it. As 2023 began, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. The crash had been a wake-up call, a reminder that nothing, not even Bitcoin, was immune to the whims of the market. But it had also been an opportunity to realign my priorities, to focus on what truly mattered. The lab, the students, the innovations we nurtured, these were the things that gave my life meaning. Bitcoin's price would rise again, of that I was certain. But whether it soared or sank, I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer defined by the numbers on a screen. I had built something real, something lasting. And that, more than any fortune, was the legacy I wanted to leave behind. As Bitcoin slowly climbed out of its slump in 2023, I found myself reflecting not only on the journey I'd taken, but also on the people who had become part of it. Over the years, I'd encountered two distinct groups, the critics and the believers. Each had played a role in shaping my decisions, and their voices often echoed in my mind during pivotal moments. The critics, unsurprisingly, were the louder of the two. Their skepticism came in many forms, some well-intentioned, others dripping with cynicism. Friends who had initially celebrated my Bitcoin holdings turned into armchair financial analysts as the market crashed and rebounded. "You're gambling," they warned. "This can't last forever." Media outlets weren't much kinder. Articles dissecting Bitcoin's flaws seemed to surface daily, each one predicting its imminent demise. Even respected economists chimed in, dismissing cryptocurrency as a speculative bubble. It's tulip mania all over again, they claimed, invoking one of history's most infamous market collapses. The noise was relentless, and at times, it was hard not to internalize their doubts. But then there were the believers. They weren't just Bitcoin enthusiasts, they were visionaries who saw something beyond the price charts. Developers working on blockchain technology, entrepreneurs building crypto-powered solutions, and even everyday users adopting Bitcoin as a means of financial freedom, their passion and conviction were infectious. I met many of these believers through the lab. Some came seeking funding for blockchain-based projects, others wanted to share their ideas or simply learn more about the technology. One particularly memorable visitor was a young entrepreneur named Ravi, who had developed a decentralized platform to help farmers in his home country access fair prices for their crops. His pitch was simple yet powerful: Bitcoin isn't just about money, it's about empowerment. Hearing stories like Ravi's reignited my faith in Bitcoin's potential. It wasn't just a volatile asset or a speculative craze, it was a tool for innovation and change. The believers reminded me of why I'd held onto my Bitcoin for so long, not just for financial gain, but for the promise of something greater. As the year progressed, I made a conscious effort to surround myself with more of these believers. Their optimism was a counterbalance to the critics' negativity, and their ideas often sparked new initiatives at the lab. Together, we launched a blockchain research program, exploring ways to use the technology for social good. From supply chain transparency to secure digital identities, the possibilities seemed endless. But the critics didn't disappear. If anything, they became more vocal as Bitcoin's price rose again, approaching $40,000 by mid-2023. "You're lucky, not smart," one detractor sneered during a panel discussion. Riding a bubble isn't the same as creating real value. Their words stung, but I'd learned to filter them. Luck had undoubtedly played a role in my journey. I'd been in the right place at the right time to receive Bitcoin when it was still a novelty. But luck alone didn't explain everything. It hadn't built the lab, launched scholarships, or inspired young innovators. Those were the results of choices, effort, and vision. In private moments, I grappled with the tension between these two groups. The critics forced me to confront uncomfortable truths, questioning assumptions I might otherwise have ignored. The believers, on the other hand, pushed me to dream bigger and embrace the possibilities that Bitcoin represented. Together, they created a dynamic that kept me grounded yet ambitious, skeptical yet hopeful. By the end of 2023, I'd come to see the critics and believers not as adversaries, but as two sides of the same coin. Their contrasting perspectives were a reflection of Bitcoin itself, a technology that inspired both fear and fascination, doubt and devotion. Navigating their voices had been one of the greatest challenges of my journey, but it had also been one of the most rewarding. As I looked ahead to 2024, I knew the debates would continue. Bitcoin would remain a polarizing topic, and my decisions would never please everyone. But that was okay. I'd learned to embrace the complexity, to find strength in the tension, and to keep moving forward. The critics would always have their doubts, and the believers would always have their dreams. And I would be right there, walking the line between them, ready for whatever came next. As 2024 began, Bitcoin was once again defying expectations. It had surged past $50,000, proving once more that the critics' proclamations of doom were premature. But this time, I approached the highs with a measured calm I hadn't possessed in the past. The journey of holding, building, and navigating both success and criticism had taught me the value of patience, not just in Bitcoin, but in life. Patience, I realized, wasn't simply about waiting. It was about enduring, adapting, and learning to make peace with uncertainty. Bitcoin's volatility had tested my resolve countless times, but it had also taught me how to stay focused on the bigger picture. I no longer checked my wallet obsessively or agonized over every market fluctuation. Instead, I shifted my energy to the projects and people that mattered most. The lab, now in its 5th year, was thriving beyond my wildest dreams. Our blockchain research program had produced several groundbreaking projects, including a decentralized voting system that was gaining traction in academic and governmental circles. Watching our ideas take root and make an impact was a source of immense pride. It reminded me that Bitcoin was more than an asset, it was a catalyst for change. But patience wasn't just about the market or the lab, it was also about relationships. Over the years, I had strained ties with friends and family who struggled to understand my choices. Some saw my decision to hold Bitcoin as reckless, others as selfish. Rebuilding those connections required vulnerability and effort. I had to explain my reasoning, acknowledge their concerns, and demonstrate that my decisions were about more than personal gain. One pivotal moment came during a family gathering in early 2024. My cousin, who had once dismissed Bitcoin as a scam, asked me how I dealt with the constant pressure. "Doesn't it feel like the whole world's watching, waiting for you to fail?" he asked. His question caught me off guard, but it also opened the door to an honest conversation. I shared the lessons I'd learned about resilience, focus, and staying true to my values, even when others doubted me. Our conversation shifted something in both of us. For the first time, he saw my journey not as a gamble, but as a testament to perseverance. And for me, it was a reminder that patience wasn't just about enduring external challenges, it was about fostering understanding and empathy. The year also brought new opportunities to share my story on a larger stage. I was invited to speak at several conferences, where I talked about the intersection of Bitcoin, technology, and social impact. Standing in front of packed audiences, I felt a mix of gratitude and responsibility. My journey was unique, but the lessons it had taught me about risk, reward, and the power of belief were universal. One of the most memorable events was a blockchain summit in Singapore, where I met innovators from around the world who were using Bitcoin to address real-world problems. From providing banking services to the unbanked in Africa to streamlining supply chains in Asia, their projects showcased the incredible potential of decentralized technology. It was inspiring to see how far Bitcoin had come and to know that, in some small way, I had been part of that journey. By mid-2024, Bitcoin's price had reached an all-time high of $75,000. The euphoria in the crypto community was palpable, but I remained grounded. I had seen too many cycles to believe that the highs would last forever. Instead of getting caught up in the frenzy, I focused on what I could control, continuing to build, support, and innovate. Looking back, I realized that the greatest lesson Bitcoin had taught me wasn't about wealth or technology. It was about patience. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, Bitcoin demanded something different. It required faith in the face of uncertainty, a willingness to endure criticism, and the courage to take the long view. As the year drew to a close, I found myself more at peace than I'd been in years. The critics were still there, as were the believers, but their voices no longer defined my journey. I had learned to trust myself, to embrace the highs and lows, and to find meaning in the process. Bitcoin was no longer just an investment, it was a lens through which I had come to understand the power of patience. The close of 2024 marked more than just another chapter in Bitcoin's unpredictable story, it signified a turning point in my life. The journey that began with a symbolic internship payment of 5 Bitcoin had evolved into something far greater than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the fortune I had amassed, but the choices I had made along the way and the impact those choices had created. Bitcoin had reached a staggering $100,000 per coin as the year ended. The headline screamed of new highs, and the crypto community celebrated with renewed fervor. But for me, the milestones felt different. They were no longer just numbers or validations of past decisions, they were opportunities to reflect on what truly mattered. With my holdings now worth an astronomical sum, I faced a pivotal question: what would my legacy be? The answer wasn't about wealth or accolades. It was about using the resources I had to shape a future that extended beyond myself. The lab became the cornerstone of that legacy. In 2025, we launched a global initiative called Blockchain for Good, aimed at funding and supporting projects that use decentralized technology to tackle pressing societal challenges. From enabling secure land ownership records in developing countries to creating transparent aid distribution systems, the initiative quickly gained traction. We partnered with NGOs, governments, and grassroots organizations, amplifying the impact far beyond what I could have achieved alone. At the same time, I took a more personal approach to giving back. A portion of my Bitcoin holdings went toward establishing an educational foundation that provided scholarships to students in STEM fields, particularly those from underrepresented communities. I thought back to my own early days, struggling to find my footing in a world that often seemed out of reach. The foundation was my way of leveling the playing field, offering others the same chance to pursue their dreams. But not all of the journey was smooth. The critics remained, questioning my choices and challenging my motives. Why hold on to the Bitcoin at all, they asked. Why not liquidate everything and solve global problems overnight? Their perspectives weren't without merit, but I had come to understand the importance of balance. Selling it all might have provided immediate benefits, but it would also have closed the door to future opportunities. Bitcoin's potential wasn't just in its current value, it was in the possibilities it represented. The believers, too, continued to push me forward. Many of them had grown alongside me, their own projects flourishing in the evolving ecosystem. One of my proudest moments came when a group of lab alumni presented their breakthrough, a decentralized energy grid that allowed remote communities to trade excess solar power seamlessly. Seeing their success was a powerful reminder of why I had held on through the ups and downs. As the years progressed, I began to step back from the day-to-day operations of the lab and the foundation. Not because I had lost interest, but because I wanted to create space for new leaders to emerge. Empowering others to carry the torch became my new focus. Their fresh perspectives and innovative ideas ensured that the impact we had started would continue to grow. By 2030, Bitcoin had become a mainstay of the global financial system. Its early volatility had given way to stability, and its adoption had reached unimaginable levels. Looking back, it was hard to reconcile the meteoric rise with the early days when 5 Bitcoin were worth less than a decent lunch. The journey felt surreal, but it also felt complete. What had started as a gamble, a quirky experiment during a humble internship, had become the foundation of a life I was proud to live. The lab, the foundation, the initiatives we launched, they were all pieces of a legacy forged not just in Bitcoin, but in the choices and lessons that came with it. As I reflected on the path I had taken, one truth stood out: wealth, like Bitcoin, was a tool. Its value wasn't in its accumulation, but in its application. And while the numbers on the screen told one story, the lives we touched told another, one of hope, innovation, and the courage to dream. Bitcoin had changed my life, but it had also taught me that the greatest fortune wasn't in the coins I held, but in the future I helped create. And that, I realized, was a legacy worth holding on to.